Hi again guys, and welcome to another look back to the first Test Drive Unlimited game to feature a car which I didn't expect to be in the game when I first started playing it. I never expect this car to be in any game because it's just not featured in that many. In fact, I can't think of another game that has ever featured this car, although I'm sure it must have been featured somewhere else at some point. Now the car in question is, of course, a classic, a Maserati. Maserati is my favourite brand overall, and I love to see any of their cars featured. The MC12 is, for obvious reasons, always the pinnacle for me. It's one of my absolute favourite cars, one of, I would say, the best supercars ever made, but other models are great to see as well. On Forza, for instance, you've got the Gran Turismos, the Gran Sports, the 3200 GTs, older ones like the Birdcage models. But at a certain point, it's almost like this era in more the 60s and 70s of Maseratis, which, and also the 80s as well to some degree, which many games just omit. They go for ones which are super old and also super new, but kind of forget about the middle. And that results in not many games having stuff like the Maverick, the Bora, the Kamzin, the older Quattroporte, the older Ghibli. Those kind of cars aren't featured as much, generally. You do get the odd occasion, but they're no way near as loved in games, or at least by the people making the games, as I would personally love to see. Now, of course, you could say that about most manufacturers. There are always blind spots and cars which you'd love to see featured, and that's one of the reasons why I love that they chose to put this car in the game, the 3500 GT. And as far as Maseratis go, visually at least, this is a much more acceptable one to go for. And the way that I mean that is, people could very easily be put off perhaps by Maseratis, thinking they're a bit oddball or look a bit weird, because some of them do, especially the older ones in comparison to something like a Ferrari or a Lambo, which is a typical poster car, whereas Maserati isn't as much, although for me it would be. But this one is more of a conventionally pretty car. It looks like an old school Mercedes sports car, or an old school Ferrari 250 GT, or some kind of old school Aston from back in the day, like a DB4, DB5, DB6. And I think that's great, because if anything can allow people to be more open-minded to these brands which maybe they don't have as much love for, then that's always a good thing. Something like a Panoz that gets someone into liking Panoz, or a Maserati that gets people into liking them, or various other manufacturers. I like it when that can happen, and that's one of the reasons why I review so many different racing games on the channel. Many people would say it's a bad idea to feature both Forza and Gran Turismo on one channel, but I do it because I like that cross-melding between two to break down these stupid barriers that people have and truly enjoy every racing game, even ones which a lot of people hate on, like Midnight Club, Need for Speed, the less realistic ones, to say the least. They are still enjoyable for different reasons. And you'll often find that those games, the more arcade-ish ones, maybe even Test Drive Unlimited or Project Gotham, will have some great cars featured. And this is a perfect example. Now, as far as what you get from the car, it's not going to blow your mind. It's not even one of Maserati's absolute fastest vehicles. It's got a 3.5 litre, as the name suggests, straight six engine. The power and the torque are reasonable, 240 pound-feet, or 253 pound-feet I should say, 240 horsepower, and it weighs 1400 kilos, which is actually quite good. It's a little bit lighter than I would have guessed when you look at the car. The horsepower per tonne still isn't massive, it's only 171, but still, for the time, that's not bad. In fact, it's pretty good. And the category is fairly low, as you'd assume it would be, G, Class G. The pricing though, and this is the cool bit, is also fairly low. It's a lot cheaper than many of the other classics in the game at 55,000 credits, and that's great because it means that a potential, say, younger person playing the game who doesn't really love classics yet, but maybe they're trying to find a foot into that market to generate their love for it or grow their knowledge and expand, this is a perfect entry point. It's more affordable, it's easy to drive, it's very fun, and it kind of introduces you to all the good stuff about a classic. The artisanship of the dials and the steering wheel and all of the gorgeous things that old school cars have on the interior. On the outside, you've got the chrome, the, again, attention to detail with design that many cars just don't have anymore. All these things add up. The sound of the car, the way it cranks over when you're trying to start the engine in this kind of I don't sort of way, which again is authentic to an older car, and it's all part of the charm. And even though the performance isn't earth-shattering, of course, 0 to 60 is over 7 seconds, top-end speed is, what, 140-ish? It's not great. In fact, it's one of the slowest classics in the game, but that's not the point. And that's never really been the point of most Maseratis. It's only in more relatively recent times that people have started to think of Maseratis as being these highly competitive cars with stuff like the MC12 race car. Of course, that's not something new, because they've been racing for years, but people, or younger people at least, don't tend to recognise that side of Maserati as much. When they think Maserati, they think fancy convertible, or oddball sedan, because that tends to be more of their modern range. This one goes to show they have more of a conventionally attainable side, something which is more open to more people liking it and not necessarily being an oddball car. This is not an oddball looking machine, it's a really good looking one. And it's one which, as I said, I'm really happy to see featured, because it's such a rare car to see love for. Personally, this is one of my favourite classics in the game, and even before Maserati became my favourite brand, which in other words is when I started playing this game, I still loved it even then. There's just something about the car which is a pleasure to work with. It looks great from the outside, the inside, it sounds good, the handling is smooth and really easy to use, and the performance, although not fast, it's fast enough. It's more of a cruiser than it is a racer. It's not a competition spec machine, it's more the kind of car that you drive around the edge of the map, cruising around the coast with. It's literally that kind of car. And in a funny kind of way, it actually reminds me of another one of my favourite classics with a similar design, the Japanese Prince Skyline, the BLRA-3, which is a fairly similar looking car if you look at the shape, and I also love that one. But overall, if you do get a chance to go back to Test Drive 1 and drive this car, I would recommend doing so, because you don't get that many opportunities to drive a real old school Maserati like this in many games. So that's it for this pick overall. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.